Good morning, Chris. How you doing today?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. So today we're going to kind of follow up on our multi-part series of DWIs, and we're going to talk about follow up a little bit of what we talked about last week with what happens after you're at the barracks, you refuse to do the to blow into the test. Is that it, or are you kind of now free to go, or what happens after you refuse to blow into that test?
Well, at some point, in most cases, you'll get released from the confinement of the police station or the trooper barracks with uh, at least several papers. And what you should remember is don't get rid of any of that paperwork. It's all
Hmm.
very, very important. Um, but if you have refused to blow into the machine that's in the trooper barracks or the police station, uh, you will be charged with a refusal to submit to a chemical test. And that brings on a whole separate line of prosecution against whoever the motorist is who's just been arrested, um, which is separate and entirely distinct from what goes on in what you understand to be the local court where you have now been arrested. So,
Okay, so what you're saying is that I'm gonna have two different kind of proceedings that I have to go through now if I
correct.
refuse. Okay, so one of those is the criminal court, local court, which we'll talk about next week. But tell us about the this other new one that we're learning about right now.
Well, it's an administrative court run by the State Department of Motor Vehicles, and you will be if you don't get something on the night that you're or the day that you're arrested, you will get something at the first court appearance. So the difficulty becomes I see a lot of people go to the first court appearance on their own and they don't realize that they are potentially jeopardizing substantial rights, because if you have refused to submit to the chemical test to blow into the machine at the first court appearance in this area of New York, uh, the judge will take your license and will very nicely tell you that you are not permitted to operate a motor vehicle on the roads in the state of New York until you get this prompt suspension lifted.
Okay, and that prompt suspension can only be through that administrative through the DMV that you just mentioned.
Well, you get referred to the Department of Motor Vehicles and they prosecute you um, separate from the town court prosecution where most of these cases start out.
Okay,
And
so walk us through what how that prosecution hearing looks like.
yes, when you've gone to your first court appearance, and if you go alone, you got to be very careful about the paperwork that you receive, because it most of the time you will, if you've had your license taken at the first court appearance before whoever the town or village judge is, um, then uh, you will be told that you have a Department of Motor Vehicles hearing, an administrative hearing, to determine whether you did in fact refuse to submit to the chemical test when the officer asked you to do so. And that prosecution is completely separate and distinct from the town court prosecution. And people have to be aware of that, because people show up at these Department of Motor Vehicles refusal hearings, is what they're called. And they very often sit there and incriminate themselves in some very painful ways, because the person doesn't even realize that since they've shown up without an attorney and are being asked by the Department of Motor Vehicles judge to give testimony, the person thinks to themselves, well, I seem to be able to handle this. And they don't realize that they may have waived some very important rights that they otherwise do have.
Okay, so if you do the right thing and you contact a lawyer such as yourself to kind of represent you at one of these refusal hearings, can you walk us through what actually happens during this refusal hearing?
Yeah, at the refusal hearing, which is very often not even in the same town as where you were arrested. The refusal hearing is in a designated spot that's designated by the Department of Motor Vehicles in each of the 62 counties in New York. So if you get busted in Dutchess County and you refused, you go to a refusal hearing, regardless of whatever town or village or city in Dutchess you got arrested in. You go to a refusal hearing up in Pleasant Valley. And that's because the Department of Motor Vehicles selected Pleasant Valley as a place for whatever reasons they made that decision. That is where the Department of Motor Vehicles will conduct refusal hearings in Dutchess County in a given month. So on one day a month, anybody who's been arrested in Dutchess County in the prior month and charged with, among other things, refusal, then they would have gotten a notice at the first court appearance, Michael, to go to this Department of Motor Vehicles refusal hearing, where typically the arresting officer will appear, or if they don't appear, you can potentially get your license back temporarily on the first default in appearing by the officer. But if the officer shows up, the officer will give a narrative testimony of what happened with respect to you being pulled over. You sit at one table, the officer sits at another table, the judge sits. It's most of the time in a courtroom in whatever town they just borrow the town court from whatever entity they're conducting these hearings in. So in the Pleasant Valley Town Court, the judge sits on a bench and hears testimony from the trooper, makes decisions about legal issues, and then very often the judge asks, will the motorist be testifying? That's you. And that's not a situation that you should put yourself in lightly, because very often people will say to me, well, I really didn't have that much to drink, so I thought I could testify on my own, and words of that nature. And they really don't realize that they've put themselves into a very incriminating situation without even realizing it, because I've seen it time and again. People will just sit there and testify, yes, I was drinking. Okay, you can mark one box. That's one less thing the district attorney has to prove. I was drinking alcoholic beverages. I was whatever I just thought I was okay, or whatever the story is, or I was on medication and I didn't realize how the two interacted, alcohol and medication. And the person doesn't realize that that's really something that they should have a lawyer making decisions about what evidence, what information gets produced and at what interval in the proceedings. So
it sounds like it's an actual, basically criminal trial. It's just in front of a different type of judge.
It is, Michael, and the judge will render a decision in many instances right there. And what the person who's the motorist has to realize is that this judge, in a great number of these cases, is about to take away my right to drive on the roads in the state of New York for 1 year. So that's suddenly the motorist is reduced to walking out of what they thought seems to be a real nice judge. I hear that a lot. Oh, the judge seems so nice, Yeah, but the judge is doing what he or she believes is their job, and you help them get the job done in a very efficient way for the court, maybe, or for the DMV, but not for yourself. And it's the motorist who's got all the rights that are in jeopardy, and needs to understand that even if they just talk to somebody who's been through, I couldn't begin to count the number of refusal hearings I've done over the years, that they can potentially save themselves a lot of agita and money just by talking with somebody before they go to these things, instead of just showing up.
And just to confirm, this has nothing to do with the fact that someone may or may not have been drinking and driving, but the fact that they refused to blow, correct?
It has to do with the police officer making certain determinations, Michael, about a person's sobriety or lack thereof, walking you through standardized field sobriety tests that people know as, oh, those tests, the finger to
Like the
nose, the walk the line, the alphabet test, the number counting, things of that sort. That now it's back at the barracks or the station, and you're being asked to submit to the test. It's a very difficult question to have to answer in what sometimes and most of the time are very harrowing circumstances. You know, there's been an accident or worse. So I think that basically covers it, but it's worth knowing that the judge who administers the motor vehicle refusal hearings and presides over them has a great amount of power, and people have to realize it's separate and distinct from the power of a town or a village court judge or a city court judge or any judge who's sitting on the criminal side of a DWI prosecution against your client.
All right. Well, thanks for kind of clarifying that. I know I myself have always been confused about that, so that was a really good explanation. Do you have a recommendation if somebody, what happens if somebody gets one of these refusal hearings, that what they should do?
It's the same recommendation I make all the time, which is just get somebody who everybody seems to know, a lawyer. Get a lawyer phone number for somebody who knows about these types of proceedings and can answer your questions very simply on the phone in a lot of instances. And at some point, you know, you're going to realize if you're in a situation like this, you've got a great deal at stake, and you really got to give some consideration to hiring an attorney to speak for you and to represent you and to defend you, which are your rights.
All right. Well, we appreciate the time, Chris, and we look forward to kind of learning more about this process next week.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. You take care.
Take care.